Of all the characters in Murder Drones, I don't think there's anyone more confusing than Jay. Not in terms of personality, as anyone who's been paying attention to this show has probably a good idea of the type of character she is, that being the best one, but what is so confusing about Jay is her role in the story of Murder Drones. This girl has died, been revived as an eldritch monster in the next episode, died again in the same episode, then in the next episode was revealed to be somehow alive, 2 episodes after that was revealed to be a clone of the original Jay, and in the following and most recent episode had a laughable 30 seconds of screen time with 2 lines. What's so bizarre about this character is that despite her dying in the first episode, her death served a purpose. Due to her dying, we got to be introduced to the Absolute Solver, which is a vital character in the narrative of Murder Drones. But once she was fully revived in episode 3, her existence has served no important purpose to the narrative. And there is only 1 episode left in the show. Fortunately, episode 7 had a massive plot twist that recontextualized the lore of the show, and although we haven't seen it yet, there is no character affected more by this reveal than Jay. The reveal that the Tessa we have known in episodes 3 and 6 has actually been Sin this whole time is extremely important, as we know from episode 5 that the only character Jay has ever shown any true empathy for is Tessa, as we see Jay show concern when Tessa winces in pain from the abuse she suffered at the hands of her parents. Based on this scene alone, we know that she has a personal attachment to Tessa, who she is loyal to not only because she's her boss, but because she sees Tessa as an actual friend or as a possible mother figure. So with this context in mind, we know that Jay's loyalty to Tessa, which we see in episode 6, is on a personal level. But then we get the reveal in episode 7 that the Tessa Jay's been loyal to in episodes 3 and 6 isn't Tessa at all, it's Sin. So this brings into question, did Jay know that this Tessa had been Sin the whole time, and if not, is she being controlled by her? Based on Jay's initial reaction to Sin in episode 2, we know that Jay has never liked Sin from the moment she first saw her, and this relationship is further expanded upon in episode 5 as she seems to still dislike Sin. But that's not all, as Jay, alongside Tessa, were the first people to find out that Sin is possessed by the Absolute Solver and is much more dangerous than anyone expected. For this reason alone, it's safe to say that she has a special hatred for Sin, as Sin wants to cause harm to humanity, who just so happen to be the founders of J.C. Jensen, which besides Tessa, seems to be the only thing that Jay personally admires. Based on this info, I'm confident in saying that if Jay knew that Tessa was actually Sin, she wouldn't obey her willingly, giving rise to the possibility that Jay is being controlled against her will. We learn in episodes 5 and 7 that Sin in the past has been able to completely control the Murder Drones to do whatever she wants, and as we learn from N in episode 7, they seem to forget all the actions they committed while under Sin's control. It's never really explained how this mind control works, but we do see that Sin tries to take control of N when she tries to hug him in episode 7, but in episode 5 she is able to take control of Jay by just being in the same room as her, so all that we can assume is that she has to be in close proximity to take control of other drones to do what she wants, which would explain why she hasn't been in control of the disassembly drones throughout episodes 1 through 5. But Jay, however, has been near Sin for an extended period of time, when Sin was pretending to be Tessa, meaning that she could control her whenever she wanted. But this likely isn't the case, since whenever Sin does take complete control of the Murder Drones, they have a giant X cover their visors, which Jay doesn't have. That's not to mention that Jay is also completely convinced she's serving Tessa, and is willing to do whatever Tessa demands, so taking control of Jay's mind would just be unnecessary at this point. If this was all the info we had, I would conclude that Jay doesn't know that Tessa is Sin and isn't under her control. But there are 2 details that nobody has seemed to bring up that actually argue otherwise. Firstly, Jay in episode 6 states that
effective drones were cloned more.
But this is a lie. As we know, disassembly drones were never produced by J.C. Jensen and are Sin's creations. The only way that Jay could have been cloned is if Sin made another Jay as a backup, which makes sense as we hear Sin outright state that she has backups of N.
I have backups. Don't worry, your backups will forgive me.
This would also explain the black orb we see floating away after Jay's core was destroyed in episode 2, as Jay's memories or personality being transferred to somewhere else, and in this case back to Sin, who transferred that data into a new body she made for Jay. The only way Jay could have known that she was cloned is if she knew that Sin made that clone, since J.C. Jensen doesn't make clones. But again, this statement could easily be brushed off as a result of Sin altering Jay's memories, which would make Jay believe that J.C. Jensen cloned her, not Sin. Secondly, the Jay plush. Murder Drones merch obviously aren't canon to the show, but let's take a peek at its description. With the Jay plush, the gang's all here. Recreate your favorite disassembly drone scenes, such as Jay yelling at N, Jay hitting N, or Jay threatening N's life and trying to end the planet. Planet-destroying force not included. This description claims that Jay wants to destroy Copper-9, which aligns exactly with Sin's motives, even though Jay says in episode 6 that the plan is to just destroy the labs that Sin wants. But this may also explain why Jay gave Tessa that uncertain look in episode 6 when she tells her to get her ship. Tessa telling Jay to mind her ship was most likely code for a plan Sin told Jay that if she tells her to get the ship, that means they are going to resort to destroying the whole planet, and she wants to make sure that nothing can escape Copper-9 besides them, which prompts Jay to destroy the old ship V and her originally landed in. The reason Jay hesitated when Tessa gave this order is because it doesn't make sense for Tessa to resort to blowing up the entire planet before she had even tried getting into the labs first, as this plan was probably a last resort that should be avoided if possible, prompting confusion from Jay when Tessa decided to execute this plan so quickly. So where does this leave us? Assuming everything I just mentioned is correct, the possibility that Jay knows that Tessa is Sin is unlikely, and she isn't being controlled by Sin. Using these deductions, it's time to try to predict what lies in store for Jay in the final episode of Murder Drones. Episode 7 sets up a showdown between Jay versus Lizzie, Thad, and Khan, which although it is a cool idea because it brings back these three characters into the story and gives them a purpose, I'm immediately concerned by this matchup because it's setting up Jay to essentially be a jobber, which, in case you don't know, is a wrestling term for a character who is set up to lose for the sole purpose of making another character look good. A great example of this, which was the first thing I thought of when I saw this scene, is when Starscream in the Michael Bay Transformers movies doesn't get a final battle and dies in the most demeaning and pathetic way possible to a couple of humans. The idea of bringing back a character who had already died for the sole purpose of dying again, so that some characters who were introduced in the show who didn't have anything to do have a purpose, is terrible writing, and wouldn't only be insulting to Jay fans, but to the average viewer of the show. There are ways this can be done well, however. Lizzie in episode 7 was told by a secret friend to investigate Jay's whereabouts for an unknown reason. The only character this could be is V, who I could have only assumed would have been suspicious of Jay when she hesitated in following Tessa's orders in episode 6, which was uncharacteristic for Jay. So when Jay does battle Thad, Lizzie, and Khan, what if they were mere distractions to keep Jay occupied while V makes her way back to the surface, and the true battle is V against Jay? This would be the perfect way to introduce V back into the plot, and even if Jay died to V working alongside Lizzie, Thad, and Khan, it would have given all 5 characters a purpose and be the battle that V and Jay had deserved this entire series. But I don't think this is what is going to happen. I think V will come back and battle Jay, and win, but I don't think Jay will die here. This is an animated series. Every single moment in it is purposely added to have a purpose within the show, and the moment when Jay worryingly looks at Tessa out of concern in episode 5 isn't a blink and you miss it moment that occurs in the background. It's a moment that has the perspective focus on. There would be no reason to not only animate and then focus on this moment if it didn't come into play later. And if this moment was just to show why Jay is so loyal to Tessa, it would be redundant because we already know from the pilot episode how loyal Jay is to her superiors. This scene is why I believe that Jay will find out that Sin killed Tessa, and it will either be revealed to her by V, or she will witness Sin wearing Tessa's corpse after she either is spared or escapes from V. From this point forward, it is impossible to tell what Jay will do when she finds out that Tessa is dead, but I'm sure she will get her redemption moment and hopefully a proper swan song scene if she dies in the final episode. But after what happened to Doll, I'm not so sure. Jay is my favorite character in Murder Drones, and I was content with her death in episode 1. But when she was brought back in episode 3, I was surprised, but my expectations were heightened as bringing back dead characters in media is a very cheap way to shock the viewer, and good writers revive characters only if they have a good reason to. Yet, 4 episodes have passed since then, and Jay has done next to nothing, only raising my expectations higher and higher, because if there wasn't a really good reason for Jay's return, then her revival might be one of the most insulting moments in the show, and make her the worst written character in the show. And after seeing how Doll was handled as a character, I am more concerned than ever for Jay's future, and I'm praying that my most beloved character in this series doesn't end up becoming one of the worst aspects in the entirety of Murder Drones.
That's the cutest fucking thing I've ever seen in my entire life.